Part two of the video. I ended up the other one. I lost some charge on the phone. But anyway, as I was explaining, this I believe that's how God learns more about life on this planet and learns about human life and how humans interact with one another and interact with Him and interact with nature, with His creation. So, yeah, I think you're supposed to live your life to the fullest, but you're supposed to learn something while you're here. You're supposed to learn the do's and the don'ts to this place. And I think that's what the Bible, the Torah, and the Quran is about. And the Quran is about. I believe it's about laws and rules, about how to interact here. And I think through the many millions of years of human civilization, we have learned the do's and the don'ts. I think that's what the Torah is about. I think that's what, not just the Torah, I think that's what the Quran is about. I think that's what the Bible is about. I think that's what all of the ancient writings were about. As were individuals doing somewhat similar to what I'm doing now, recording their experiences for other people in the next generation to learn about, to read it, learn about it, and not make the same mistakes. And that's supposed to do this. If I make mistakes and I leave a record of it, then the next generation is supposed to find it, read it, and then not do it, not make the same mistakes. And if they don't make the same mistakes, when the next generation comes along and reads about their mistakes, whatever mistakes that generation makes, not the ones that I made, they got better. And then they take the next generation after them, takes their experiences, and then they learn from their mistakes. And if you do it like that, each succession of generations gets better. They get better, and that's how civilization is supposed to get better and better and better and better. However, there are, for some reason, generations that don't look back on history. And there's an old saying, I forgot who actually said this first, but I'm quoting them, that if you don't learn from history, then you're doomed to repeat it. And if we keep repeating history over and over and over again, that means that tells God something, that we're not learning. That something is happening to where we're not learning. That human civilization, as well as individual humans, are not learning. Why? Maybe when we die, we go up there, and He sees all this data from all these billions of souls that He sent here to the planet. Maybe He starts to realize, like, something's wrong. Maybe that's what the job of the prophets are for. Maybe the prophets are sent here to wake humanity up and say, hey, listen, we're not doing good. And for some strange reason, I have this inspiration in me to tell you guys that we're not doing good here on this planet, that civilizations are not getting better, and that maybe the grand architect of all things is not happy with us, is not satisfied with us because of that, right? And maybe that's exactly what happens. Maybe that's exactly what happens. And maybe that's why the prophets are sent. But we don't like prophets. The papers, scriptures, scrolls, tablets, etc., that we have found have shown throughout these stories in these different literature that human beings don't like prophets. They don't like people telling them what to do, how to do it, and that they're wrong. They tend to lash out on the prophets and sometimes even kill them. Sometimes they even murder the prophets because they don't want to hear that they're doing wrong. They like what they're doing, and they don't care that they're doing. In some cases, they don't even care that they're doing wrong. They just continue to do it, even though the problems that they're creating are the same problems that were written about years and years and years ago. And the ultimate result in those problems ended up with a solution of destruction. And that's not really a productive solution to any problem, if you ask me. So here I am at the Lincoln Memorial. I've walked these steps yesterday. The phone went out, so I didn't get a chance to finish my commentary yesterday. But Today it's a little bit rainy out, but I got a chance to finish that part. And now I can get into what I really came here to talk about. First, I got to show you guys this. I don't know if I got all of it. Look at this big old temple, man. It's like I'm in Rome somewhere. Look at that. Look at the architecture right there, man. I feel like I'm in ancient Egypt, because that's where Rome got their ideas from. Alexandria. You know? King Khufu, or Kufar, whatever, however you want to translate it, was supposedly the king who built the Great Pyramid of Giza. King Khufu. I studied a little bit about him. There's a few other cities in Egypt that are famous too, but I don't know how to pronounce them. There's one that starts with the H. I think it's called Heliopolis. Anyway, there's one with an H, Heliopolis or something like that. But those were the great learning centers that the initiates will go to learn from the teachers, the great teachers and great masters of those days, to learn the greater mysteries of life and the mysteries of these temples and these buildings. I will tell you what organization that comes from, but I think I'm gonna keep my mouth closed on that. And I think that's the way it's supposed to be, if you're not an initiate or if you're not a member. So, yeah, man, look at that. Now, I can't get that close to it, but there are different insignias up there, different sigils. Not really different sigils, but they're different, what they call little reefs or whatever. And next to the reef is a different state of the United States. I don't think you can see it from this point of view because it's a little bit far back. But this is beautiful, right? And on the inside of it, you already know what's on the inside of it. Is this big statue of Abraham Lincoln sitting there on his throne, but in a chair. Abraham Lincoln is called the Great Emancipator. And the reason why he's called the Great Emancipator is because he wrote a document called the Emancipation Proclamation, which is supposedly, allegedly, the document that freed the slaves in 1865. But from the studies that I've been doing, the slaves are actually, that was when they were officially, that's when it was official, the announcement was made that they weren't slaves anymore. However, they did fight in the Civil War, and that's actually when they became emancipated. But he decided to make it official because of the sacrifices that they made. I hate using the word sacrifice because of the negative connotation that's attached to it, but that's when they gave their service to the Civil War on both sides, the North and the South. Don't let it be known, don't think that the slaves only fought in the South. They also fought in the North. They said that there wasn't any slaves in the North, but there were. They were just indentured slaves, sharecroppers, systematic slaves, if you will. They wasn't chattel slavery. Chattel slavery and indentured slavehood is totally different. Indentured servanthood is two different things. Chattel slavery is basically, we treat you like cattle. And indentured slavehood is, I treat you a little bit better than cattle, but you're still gonna work for me. You're still my employee. And I treat you with a little bit more respect than your brothers and sisters who are in chattel slavery. But while I'm on the subject of that, I'm glad that I pointed that point out. I am standing right here on the same platform that Dr. Martin Luther King stood on when he gave his I Have a Dream speech. Right here. And this is kind of eerie for me because I am an African American. And I don't know, maybe I grew up in a different time frame in America where the educational system focused a lot of importance on Dr. King and on his message. And because of that, I get goosebumps standing here because there were right out here, right out there were thousands upon thousands upon thousands of people standing there to hear that speech. And that speech was not just given to African Americans, it was given to It was given to white Americans. I like to call them European Americans because I'm identifying with their source. But white Americans, there were also Arab Americans there, Indian Americans. There probably was all types of races there from what I've read. But there was thousands, right behind me, there were thousands and thousands of people there listening to this speech. Thousands and thousands of people, not even maybe 60 years ago, not even that. Standing here making a difference, changing the world, trying to change the world. They did. In a certain shape, form, or fashion, they changed the world with that one speech. All of these people out here. And this is also the site of many other speeches, of many other different people who decided to come out and have a voice for those who they felt didn't have a voice. And what other better place than to do that right here in front of the statue of the great emancipator, Abraham Lincoln. So, let me quit running my mouth and walk these stairs. Walk these stairs right quick. I would say that, but I'm not going to say that. I'm not going to disrespect anybody and their beliefs. That's not what I feel. But I do feel that walking the stairs gives you a great amount of exercise for your physical body and your mind too. Because you have to, in order to go through a lot of physical pain and physical stress, you have to have a mind that's fortified and strong. Excuse me. Pardon me. So this is the Great Hall where the statue is. There he is. Statue of Abraham Lincoln. Land of Illinois, land of Lincoln. I shouldn't say. There was a teacher of mine who said, "Don't say Illinois. That's ignorant. It's not Illinois. That's the silent. It's Illinois." So, excuse me, if the teacher is watching to this day. Sorry about that. Illinois, not Illinois. I don't want to offend any Native Americans who originated from there. But we find a little bit of light there. Okay. So now, the topic that I wanted to cover today is a little bit about what there was a guy in history that I've been studying. His name is Thaddeus Kosicucko. Some people pronounce it in different ways, but anyway, his name was Thaddeus. He was a Polish general, army general, and engineer. He came from Poland. He originated in Poland. He wasn't high class, but he was like middle class, what we would consider middle class. And he grew up kind of learning. He was educated. They said he was a peasant back then, but he wasn't really a peasant. He had a mom and dad that was a little bit wealthy and affluent, and they taught him some good knowledge, gave him a good education, and then he went to cadet school, and he learned how to be in the military, and he learned military values and principles, and from there, he went from that straight into the armed forces. He heard about America and he heard about what was going on in America at the time, and this was like in the 1700s. So in 1775, he came from Poland all the way to the United States and enlisted in the Continental Army. At that time, George Washington was the commander, the chief of command of the Continental Army, and he worked directly with George Washington. And later down the line, Thomas Jefferson as well. But he had a great relationship with George Washington, and he helped fight alongside George Washington. One of his greatest battles was the Battle of Saratoga, in which he helped back up the British from invading America and invading the land of America. And also he built a great fortification in New York, West Point, New York, which is still a military academy to this day, and they still train cadets to this day in New York. So yeah, those are a few of his accomplishments. He also went back to Poland, and when he went back to Poland, he fought for the independence of Poland, and he did that through a succession of different little battles that turned into a war with Russia. He was trying to fight for their independence. He was with something called a Polish Confederacy, and that was just a small band of citizens, regular citizens, who decided to take up arms and fight for their independence against the annexation of Poland to Russia at the time. He didn't really win that. They ended up losing that war, and he came back to. He was jailed for a little while. He was jailed for a little while by a woman named Catherine the Great. But after Catherine the Great was passed away, he ended up coming back to the United States. He was pardoned, and he ended up coming back to the United States. And here's where he passed. Well, no, he didn't pass here in the United States, but he came back here for a little while, and he joined with Thomas Jefferson for a little while, and then he ended up passing away in Switzerland. Before he did that, while he was here with George Washington in his first trip, he met a guy, I think his name was Agrippa Hole, one of the two. But he was an African-American slave. When the Polish commander, or Polish engineer, Thaddeus Kosicucko, however you want to pronounce it, when he was sent to the South to join the troops there, he met this guy, and this guy became one of his trusted friends. And he took this guy everywhere with him. And when he took this guy everywhere with him, he kind of discovered what the plight of the African American was here in the United States. And at the time, slavery was in full gear. Chattel slavery was in full gear. And it touched him. It touched his heart. It touched his heart a lot. He hated to see them in that condition. So while he wasn't actually working for George Washington and fighting on the side of the Federalists here against the British,